This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want Magic singles or sealed product, use my link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahon, and with this video I'm kicking off my Avatar The Last Airbender set review. Over the next several days I'll give my thoughts on every single card in the set and how I think they'll perform in the limited format. And we're starting with a look at the multicolored and colorless cards. This is always a fun place to start because multicolored cards give us an idea of the format's two color archetypes, and multicolored cards also tend to be some of the most powerful cards in a set. For each of these cards, I'll discuss how I think they'll perform in limited, that means draft and sealed, and I'll punctuate each evaluation with a letter grade. If you're new to my set reviews and unsure of what my letter grades mean, you can find a guide in the description. There are some important things to keep in mind as I review these cards. First, because this is a video about draft and sealed exclusively, I'm only going to be talking about cards that can be found in play boosters. This set has supplementary products that have cards that won't be showing up in play boosters, like cards from the Eternal Legal set. So if there's a card that you think is missing from this video, it's probably not in play boosters. There is a bonus sheet in play boosters for this set, but it's very rare, with one appearing in every 25 packs. So I'm going to address those in their own video after reviewing all the cards in the main set. These are also my evaluations of these cards before it's possible to play this new limited format, because my goal is to have my set review done in time for the pre-release, and that of course means I'll be wrong about some things. But as the format comes into focus, I'll be doing videos where I discuss how things have panned out. I also want to let you know that there are some set review related perks for being a channel member or a patron. You get access to my ongoing set notes during preview season, and you'll also get a spreadsheet with all of my grades once a set review is complete. If those perks interest you, check out the description, where you can find out how to support the channel using one of those methods. Alright, without further ado, let's dive in with a look at the multicolored and colorless cards in Avatar The Last Airbender. We're going to start with colorless non-artifacts. There is a trio of lessons that fall into this category in this set. One thing to note about this set is that unlike Strixhaven, which is the last time and the only time before this that we saw lessons, there are not cards with learn in the format, and that means you can't grab lessons out of your sideboard. That does make all the cards with lesson significantly worse than they would have been in a set like Strixhaven, because that set had tons of cards that had some effect and then let you also basically draw the best card from your sideboard, which is really strong. In this set, you're playing them in your main deck. There are lesson payoffs, but they don't have anything to do with learn. We'll see some of those lesson payoffs in this video. Anyway, Aang's Journey is 2 generic for a sorcery lesson at common. It has kicker for 2 generic. You search your library for a basic land card. If the spell was kicked, instead search your library for a basic land and a shrine card. Reveal those cards, put those cards into your hand, and then shuffle, and you gain 2 life. So this is actually a lot like a card from Strixhaven that had basically the same effect without kicker, and it was one of the best commons in the set. This won't be quite as good for the reasons I already mentioned. You can't grab this out of your sideboard, which is really great because it makes every card with learn into your deck into a source of fixing, but this is just going to have to be in your deck. It's going to have to be a card you draw normally, so it's just a solid way to fix your mana. If you kick it later, you can get a 2-for-1 because you can grab a shrine, but you're not always going to have shrines. There aren't a lot of them. There's one in each color at uncommon, so it's not like they're going to be everywhere. But sometimes it can give you a 2-for-1 late, which is nice. Mostly though, it's just this 2 mana mode, which is an okay card, especially if you're interested in spells or lessons or needing to fix your mana, and those are things you're going to care about, so I think this is a C. Next up, it's Energy Bending, which for 2 generic is an uncommon instant lesson, and lands you control gain all basic land types until end of turn and you draw a card. So this fixes your mana for a turn and replaces itself, but it's not that good in limited. It's very challenging to actually take advantage of this kind of fixing in limited. Making all your lands into every basic land type sure can mean you have perfect mana, but you don't need perfect mana very often in limited, and there aren't that many windows where this actually does something, especially when you're also spending 2 mana in a turn. And sometimes people look at a card like this and they say, but it replaces itself. It can't be that bad. But we've seen so many cards lately that have these basically meaningless effects, but sort of can cycle like this one, just not be very good. Like these days, paying 2 to draw a card isn't worthwhile. If you really need fixing and you're really into spells and lessons, you might play this card, but I don't think it makes the cut most of the time. I'm giving it a D. Next, there's Zuko's Exile, which for 5 generic is a common instant lesson, and it says exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment. Its controller creates a clue token. So 5 mana to exile one of these 3 permanents with an instant would be okay. It's not an amazing card because it's so expensive, but it is flexible, and it can do it at instant speed. That card would probably be a C+ if I was feeling really generous, but this is substantially worse because it gives your opponent a clue. So you do end up 2-for-1ing yourself, but at least your opponent has to spend some mana to draw that card, and you do remove whatever it is from the battlefield. You don't give them something that can attack or block in its place. So it's not terrible, but I don't think it's great either. I think it's probably a C-. This is another one that would be great if you could actually grab it with a learn card, though, because sometimes you just really need removal. And while it's not amazing removal, being able to grab it only when you need it is pretty amazing. All right, let's move to the multicolored cards now, starting with Aang at the Crossroads, which for 2 generic, a green, a white, and a blue, is a 3/3 legendary human avatar ally at rare. When he enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you can put a creature card with mana value 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and when another creature you control leaves the battlefield, transform Aang at the beginning of the next upkeep, at which point he becomes Aang, Destined Savior, a legendary avatar ally, a colorless 4/4 with flying, gives your land creatures vigilance, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you earthbend 2. That means target land you control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that's still a land, and you put a number of counters on it equal to the earthbend value, in this case 2, and when that land dies or is exiled, you return it to the battlefield tapped. So it animates your land, but also kind of protects it, so if your opponent kills the 2/2 or you trade with it, you do get your land back, you don't lose your mana forever. So this is amazing. A 5-mana 3/3 flyer that puts a creature in your top 5 on the battlefield is an excellent deal. It almost doesn't matter what creature it is. It could be a 1-drop and you're still going to feel like you're coming out ahead. And frequently it'll be a 2 or 3 mana or even 4 mana card. There is a chance you whiff, like there's not a 100% chance. It is specific enough. It says creature with mana value 4 or less. But most limited decks have a large quantity of that kind of card. That's just how limited decks play out. You usually have a lot of creatures, and most of them cost 4 mana or less because you don't want that many 5, 6, and 7 mana cards. So most of the time you're going to hit something. The whiff will happen occasionally, but it's a very low chance of happening. So you start out with a 2-for-1 almost every time you cast this, and then he turns into a pretty scary 4/4 that starts sending your lands at your opponent, giving them vigilance, can attack itself. So you get really good value here with the front side, and the other side is a very legitimate win condition, and you're often going to be able to get both. And even when you don't get the chance to transform him, you do have this awesome interest trigger. So this is a bomb, giving it an A. Next up, it's Aang, Swift Savior, which for 1 generic, a white, and a blue is a 2/3 legendary human avatar ally at rare. It's got flash and flying. When it enters, you airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. That means you exile it, and while it's exiled, its owner may cast it for 2 generic rather than its mana cost. You can target your own stuff with this, with airbending, to rebind interest trigger or potentially save a creature from removal. But I think about 85% of the time you're going to want to go after your opponent's stuff because it gives you some pretty significant tempo. You can also waterbend for 8 generic and transform Aang. Waterbend means when you're paying the cost for that ability, you can tap any number of creatures and artifacts you control to help pay for that, and each of those you tap pays for 1 generic. And then he transforms into Aang and Law, Ocean's Fury, a 5/5 legendary avatar spirit ally. It's colorless with reach and trample. And when Aang and Law attack, you put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control. So this is really strong too. Aang is the main character, so I guess he gets some awesome cards. You get a reasonably efficient flyer here that can interact with creatures on board or even spells on the stack, while also possessing the ability to turn into a creature that will make your entire board far more intimidating. And because of water bending, Aang is going to transform more often than it would in most sets. Also, because Aang doesn't exile to transform, Aang and Law can attack immediately after transforming and buff everything you use to tap it. I think it just gives you an incredible rate and a very scary win condition. I think it's an A-. Next up, it's Abandon Attachments, which for 1 generic and a blue-red hybrid mana is a common instant lesson. You may discard a card. If you do, you draw 2 cards. A hybrid Tormenting Voice is a solid thing to have. It's never exciting, but it does dig you deeper in your deck and is extra useful in spell, graveyard, and lesson decks. They did a good job designing a bunch of hybrid commons for this set that sort of overlap into multiple archetypes, and this is certainly one of those. So it's going to be a solid inclusion in most blue and red decks and in most blue-red decks, but it's never going to be anything exciting either. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Air Nomad Legacy, which for a white and a blue is an uncommon enchantment, and when it enters, you create a clue token, and creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. Obviously enough, the blue-white color pair likes flyers, and as such, this will be an anthem that buffs a decent percentage of your creatures, and flyers getting buffed can be particularly potent since they're harder to block than most creatures. This would be a lot worse, though, if it didn't also give you a clue, making sure you get a card of value out of this thing, which might even help you draw another flyer. I think this comes out as a B-. You know, they made sure it had a good baseline and it has a really high ceiling. Next, it's Avatar Aang, which for red, a green, a white, and a blue is a 4/4 legendary human avatar ally at Mythic Rare with flying and firebending 2. Firebending means you get an amount of mana equal to the firebending value when this creature attacks, but you can only use that mana during combat. Whenever you waterbend, earthbend, firebend, or airbend, you draw a card, and if you've done all 4 in a turn, you transform Avatar Aang, at which point he becomes Aang, Master of Elements, a legendary 6/6 avatar ally that's colorless, has flying, makes your spells cost white, blue, black, red, green less to cast, and that can reduce generic costs. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you may transform Aang, Master of Elements. If you do, you gain 4 life, draw 4 cards, put 4 +1/+1 counters on him, and he deals 4 damage to each opponent. So he's hard to cast for sure, but a 4-mana 4/4 with flying and firebending 2 that draws you a card is like what the baseline is here, and that's a pretty good card. And it gets better than that because if you have other bending things going on, which you're likely to, those effects are all over the format, he draws you even more cards. What you shouldn't expect, though, is to transform him. Pulling off all 4 in a turn is incredibly difficult and limited. Even though he has firebending built in, the other 3 are going to be pretty hard to come by, all in the same turn. So you're mostly talking about the front side here. Obviously, the other side is nuts, especially when you transform it back into Avatar Aang and get that insane trigger, but I wouldn't count on doing it. This is also pretty difficult to cast. 4 colors is a lot more than 3. You know, 3 color cards are usually castable and limited. If you have a couple sources of fixing, you're going to need more than that for this. That's hard to pull off, and that certainly tempers my expectations for this card. If he was easy to cast, he'd probably be an A because he's the kind of card that if you untap and get to attack with him, you just start going off with card advantage and all sorts of other stuff. But because he's hard to cast, you have to have that impact the grade. You know, you do have to spend the mana to cast this. That's not always going to be easy, and most decks won't even be able to do it. So I think he's a B overall, and obviously the caveat is, like, he's an A if your mana's perfect. Next up, it's Azula, Cunning Usurper, which for 2 generic, a blue, and 2 black is a 4/4 human noble rogue at rare. She has firebending 2, and when she enters, target opponent exiles a non-token creature they control, then they exile a non-land card from their graveyard. During your turn, you may cast cards exiled with Azula, and you may cast them as though they had flash. Mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. So she gives you at least a 2-for-1 up front because of her enters trigger. Keep in mind your opponent is the one who chooses what gets exiled. You target them and then they make a choice. So whatever gets exiled is likely to be their worst non-token creature, but you are still taking away a creature from your opponent while adding a 4/4 to the board. And if Azula gets to stick around or you already have the mana, you can cast the thing she exiles. And that's without even discussing what happens to the graveyard, because you do also exile a card from there. Again, they get to choose which one, so you'll get their best non-land from their graveyard, and you can cast that too. Firebending means she can help you cast it as well, especially because they have flash once she's exiled them. This isn't an effect where you maintain access to the cards after Azula dies. Keep that in mind. It's an effect on her that you need to have in order for it to work, instead of something that gets added to a card when it's in exile. So she will die sometimes before you can do it, but even then she will have still taken away a creature and given you a 4/4. Your opponent killed it, obviously, but that's still a 2-for-1. And if she's left unchecked, she'll usually generate a 3-for-1, which is obviously amazing. So she's a bomb. I'm giving her an A. Next up, it's Beifong's Bounty Hunters, which for 2 generic, a black, and a green is a 4/4 human mercenary at rare. Whenever a non-land creature you control dies, you earthbend X, where X is that creature's power. This counts itself, meaning it almost always generates value, and you get something reasonably close to a 2-for-1. It's probably not quite a full-blown 2-for-1 if they just kill it right away, but it's pretty close. You know, getting a token is better than animating a land, generally speaking. It would be a 2-for-1 if you got a creature token, but it's not quite there. Still, it's a very, very good card, and I do think it's a bomb. It's very difficult for your opponent to ever come out ahead of it. Even if it's not quite a full-blown 2-for-1, it's really close. And then you throw in the upside of, if this sticks around, it's just going to keep animating your lands or making your lands bigger. So it's a bomb. I'm giving it an A. Next up, it's Bitter Work, which for 1 generic, a red and a green is an uncommon enchantment, and whenever you attack a player with 1 or more creatures with power 4 or greater, you draw a card, and it has Exhaust for 4 generic, and you earthbend 4, and Exhaust means you can only do that once, and in this case, you can also only do it during your turn. In the past, when we've seen this type of card in Limited, it's been a huge disappointment, like Garrick's Uprising. It had a horrible win rate, didn't really work out either time we've seen it. And while this is different, it can be triggered multiple times with one thing, and has a built-in ability that can help you trigger it. But I still have concerns like spending 3 mana and getting nothing up front, so it's pretty hard for me to go above a C here. Next up, it's Boomy Unleashed, which for 3 generic, a red and a green is a 5/4 legendary human noble ally at Mythic Rare with Trample. When he enters, you Earthbend 4, and when he deals combat damage to a player, untap all lands you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Only land creatures can attack during that combat phase. So I'm in on a 5 mana 5/4 that also gives me a 4/4, and he can often send that token in right away. Like if you had 6 mana when you cast this, you get your 4/4 and you get to attack with it immediately, which is going to be nice on a lot of boards. You won't always be able to do that, but it's on the table. And then his combat damage to a player trigger is really strong. You can use it to attack with that 4/4 again, but keep in mind you can also just choose to untap all your lands and not even take advantage of the combat step. You can't always do something by untapping your lands, but this format has more mana sinks in it than normal because they put a bunch in for the firebending mechanic, so I suspect you'll have something to use that mana on pretty often. You'll also have other earthbent lands potentially that can attack again. So overall, he gives you a lot of value. You know, if they kill him right away, you still have an animated land. That's going to feel fine. And if they don't kill him, he can run away with the game. I think this is another bomb, giving him an A. Next up, it's Cat Owl, which for 3 generic and a white-blue hybrid mana is a 3/3 cat bird at common. When this attacks, you untap target artifact or creature. 4 mana 3/3 flyers have been duds really across the board of late when they don't have like a meaningful interest trigger or something, and this obviously doesn't. And its attack trigger isn't that good either. Like it's pseudo vigilance at worst. You can use it to help you with water bending as well. Like you tap something for water bending, now you can untap it. It's a flyer. That's what the blue-white deck is about. So it's another one of these hybrid commons, like all of them, that overlaps into multiple decks. But it's not going to be a card you're excited about playing in any of them because 2 drops can attack into it without any problem, and 2 mana removal can kill it, and it doesn't give you anything up front. You know, it's the kind of card that if your opponent spends 2 to kill is really backbreaking in a typical game of Magic. I just think it's a D+. Next, it's Cruel Administrator, which for 3 generic, a black and a red is a 5/4 human soldier at uncommon. It enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if you attack this turn, and when it attacks, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with fire bending 1. This attack trigger is really good, and this will be a 6/5 some of the time, but when it's a 5/4, it is significantly worse because there is lower rarity removal in the set that can take it down for like 2 mana, not to mention 3 mana creatures that can easily trade for it. 5 mana 5/4s just don't tend to play well without some immediate value, and needing to both get this to a 6/5 and attack with it once to really feel like you're getting there does take enough setup that I think this is just a C. Next up, it's Dai Li Agents, which for 3 generic, a black and a green is a 3/4 human soldier at uncommon. When it enters, you Earthbend 1, then Earthbend 1, and when it attacks, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them. So this is the main signpost uncommon for black-green. Signpost uncommons tell you what a color pair is about, and black-green is about earthbending and tokens more broadly. And keep in mind here, you can either earthbend the same land twice, like if you need a 2/2, or animate 2 separate lands. Doing the latter is going to make Dai Li Agent's attack trigger better since it'll drain more life when it attacks. The bad news is your 5 mana 3/4 that's attacking on turn 6 may not have a board that really lets it attack and survive, or even attack and trade. If you can attack and trade, you're probably going to do it because you're draining at least 2 life most of the time, and your opponent loses a creature, and you still have 2 animated lands. So you come out way ahead there. But if they can just block it with like their 4/4, that's not going to feel amazing. Sometimes this trigger is worth giving up a creature for, but it's not always. Still, it gives you value up front. It's pretty good value, and then it has nice synergy with +1/+1 counters, which there are a lot of in black-green. I think it's a B-. Next up, it's Dragonfly Swarm, which for 1 generic, a blue and a red, is a *3 dragon insect at uncommon. It's got flying in ward 1, and its power is equal to the number of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard, and when it dies, if there's a lesson card in your graveyard, draw a card. This is really strong. You know, blue-red is all about non-creature, non-land spells, as it often is, and it also likes lessons. You do need to have some cards in your graveyard to set this up, but you're likely to have that in the blue-red color pair. It gets especially good when you have a lesson in the graveyard, because at that point, it's an aerial threat that's going to grow throughout the game, and if your opponent can kill it, they still get 2 for 1. Plus, you throw ward in, and that makes it even more painful to kill it. So this looks excellent to me for a signpost uncommon. giving it a B. Next up, it's Earth Kingdom Soldier, which for 4 generic and a green-white hybrid mana is a 3/4 human soldier at common. It's got vigilance, and when it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. So this can put a counter on itself, so even if your board's empty, the fail case is a 5 mana 4/5 with vigilance. That's not great, but it's worth noting that as a fail case, you could do a lot worse, and he'll usually have at least one other place to put the other counter, at which point you're getting lots of value for the cost. And frequently, it'll be better to put both counters on other things because those things can probably attack immediately, unlike Earth Kingdom Soldier. But obviously, this works with +1/+1 counter synergies that we see in black-green. It works with go-wide synergies, which are in red-white. So it's another one of these that is well-designed and will slot into lots of decks. It is 5 mana. It's kind of expensive, but it's the kind of 5 mana card that I think you're pretty happy about having one copy of in a lot of your decks because it can really augment your board while also adding a significant body itself. I think it's a C+. Next up, it's Earth King's Lieutenant, which for a green and a white is a 1/1 human soldier ally at rare. It's got trample. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other ally creature you control. And whenever another ally you control enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This set has lots of allies, especially in green-white, and I love that this keys off of them, whether they're already in play or you cast them after he enters. Sometimes payoffs in Limited are awkward when they only do one or the other, but this can do both. It's a lot like Thalia's Lieutenant, which is obviously the card this is a reference to. Trample also means it can be quite the threat. Like if you play this on turn 2, it's going to be a pretty big threat pretty quickly, and then if you get it later, it's going to buff a bunch of your board. Green-white is the color pair most into allies, so this is a B. Next up, it's Earth Rumble Wrestlers, which for 3 generic and a red-green hybrid mana is a 3/4 human warrior performer at common. It's got reach. It gets +1/+0 and has trample as long as you control a land creature or a land entered the battlefield under your control this turn. A 4 mana 3/4 reach isn't great, but this will be a 4/4 with trample too, decent chunk of the time, and a 4 mana 4/4 reach and trample would probably be like a C, maybe a C+ these days at best, but I even think that's too high. Like once you're spending 4 mana, you kind of want the card to do something other than just be a body. And this falls short of always being a 4 mana 4/4 reach and trample, though it is nice that it likes lands being animated and lands entering, so there are multiple scenarios that make it into a 4/4. But this still doesn't look great to me. It's not always going to make the cut. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Earth Village Ruffians, which for 2 generic and a black-green hybrid mana is a 3/1 human soldier rogue at common. When it dies, you earthbend 2. A 3 mana 3/1 is pretty bad. A 3 mana 3/1 that dies into a 2/2 is really good, but this isn't quite that. But it's close enough to be decent. It also works well with all the earthbending stuff in black-green, as well as sacrifice stuff that's in black-white. So again, these are all designed quite well to slot into multiple things, but it's never going to be a key card in any of those decks. It's just a C. Next up, it's Firelord Azula, which for 1 generic, a blue, a black, and a red is a 4/4 legendary human noble at rare. It's got firebending 2. Whenever you cast a spell while Firelord Azula is attacking, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So she's going to feel amazing if you can double something with her. Even if it's just a combat trick, it's likely to be pretty good. Firebending also makes it easier for you to pull something off. One thing I will note is part of what makes firebending good on its own is that there are lots of mana sinks in the set to put it into. If you could only cast spells with firebending in this set, it would be substantially worse because it's hard to have a spell consistently once you play one of these creatures. And that's kind of what I'm worried about here, is that she demands a spell in order for you to get extra value out of her. Because a 4 mana 4/4 that's hard to cast with Firebending 2 on its own, not that good. So you really need to be able to double spells when you cast her. It's doable, like doubling a removal spell will be completely absurd. Like I said, a combat trick is even okay. You're not going to get creatures that often unless they have flash or you have some effect that lets you cast them at instant speed. So a lot of the time, I think she'll just play like a 4 mana 4/4 that lets you pay for your activated abilities a little more easily because of firebending and a hard to cast 4 mana 4/4, and you won't be able to trigger the double spell thing often enough for her to be amazing. I think she's just a B-. Next up, it's Firelord Zuko, which for a red, a white, and a black is a 2/4 human noble ally at rare. He's got Firebending X, where X is Firelord Zuko's power. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, and whenever a permanent you control enters from exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this +1/+1 counter trigger is pretty incredible, and it will be particularly good alongside airbending, as that gives you a way to put things into play from exile easily and cheaply. As usual, red also has a few cards that let you cast stuff from exile after revealing them off the top of your library. Firebending's nice too and can get better the bigger Zuko gets, and he does put a counter on himself with his trigger. But I do think this needs a build around grade, as if you don't have the mana to support him and like 5 or so cards that let you cast things from exile, he's not going to be good. He's probably a D in a deck that doesn't get there on synergy, but a B plus in the right deck. Next up, it's Foggy Swamp Spirit Keeper, which for one generic, a blue and a black, is a 2/4 human druid allied uncommon. It's got lifelink, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token with. This token can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. A 3-mana 2/4 with lifelink is like an okay playable, and this has some real value engine potential beyond that. Those spirits are great threats. The fact they can't block will come up. Like sometimes what makes making a token so good is it lets you add a body to the board that can additionally protect you or deter your opponent from attacking you. These aren't going to do that most of the time. There are spirits in the set, including other spirit tokens, so sometimes they'll be able to block, but like 95% of the time they won't be able to. Don't mistake that as not a problem. It is going to be one. It makes the tokens a little worse in the immediate future, but like in the long run, there may be a little better, or at least it's a wash because they become these very difficult to block tokens. You know, you're going to be attacking with them every turn and getting in for damage most of the time. So all of that in mind, this looks like a B- to me. Next up, it's Guru Pathic, which for 2 generic and 2 green-blue hybrid mana is a 2/4 legendary human monk ally at uncommon. When he enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you can reveal a Lesson Saga or Shrine from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And whenever you cast a Lesson Saga or Shrine, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. So how good this is all comes down to how often you draw a card with that enters trigger. So it probably needs a build around grade. There aren't enough Lesson Sagas and Shrines in every blue-green deck or every green or every blue deck, because you can play it in all of those because of the hybrid mana, for this to just automatically be good in all of them. You probably need like 5 things with those subtypes, which is doable, to make Guru Pathic worth playing. Because if this is mostly a 4-mana 2/4 that gives you a counter like 1 out of 5 games, that's just not very good. So I think it's like a C-. Like I think most decks are going to have a few of these cards, so it's not like an F or a D, because you'll still get a hit like a third of the time or something. But if you really have a lot of cards with these types, like I said, 5+, this can work out really well, because it's sort of like you draw a card and get a counter, though Guru Pathic does have to survive for you to get that counter. But it's a good build around, but not that great if you don't get there on synergy. Next, it's Hama the Bloodbender, which for 2 generic and 3 blue-black hybrid mana is a 3/3 legendary human warlock at uncommon. When it enters, target opponent mills 3 cards, and you can exile up to 1 non-creature, non-land card from that player's graveyard. For as long as you control Hama, you may cast the exiled card during your turn by waterbending X, rather than paying its cost, where X is its mana value. So a 5-mana 3/3 is bad, but this will usually net you a card of value, and even makes that card easier to cast thanks to waterbending. The bad news, Hama only lets you play that card while it sticks around, so it's another one of those. So there's a chance your opponent spends like 2 to kill this and you walk away with nothing, and that's pretty nasty. Waterbending does make it more likely you can cast the card before Hama dies, since you can potentially just do it right away. You can even tap Hama for waterbending. But there is also a significant chance of whiffing, because you can only go after non-creature, non-lands, and the most common card in your opponent's decks are creatures and lands. So there's a chance you whiff. It does look at the whole graveyard, so keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be from among the cards that were milled. But I don't love the cost of this card or the fail case. I also don't love that even though they made it a hybrid card that's supposed to slot into multiple decks, they gave it 3 of these pips. So if you're not in blue-black and you're just in like blue-red or black-red, casting this is pretty hard. Like 3 colored pips like on curve when you need to cast this is tough. It's really easy to cast in blue-black. Like it's going to be very easy to cast there, and that's great. But I do think that limits its usefulness, because there are going to be times where you just can't cast it for an entire game because it's so mana intensive. I'm giving this a C+. Next up, it's Hey Bye, Spirit of Balance, which for 2 generic and 2 white-black hybrid mana is a 3/3 legendary bear spirit at uncommon. When it enters or attacks, you can sacrifice another creature or artifact, and if you do, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on Hey Bye. And when Hey Bye leaves the battlefield, put its counters on target creature you control. So it's nice that this is an enters or attacks trigger, but You also won't always have things worth sacrificing. It is worth noting there's like lots of clues in this set. That's like the ideal thing to sacrifice. But if you don't have something worth sacrificing, like good fodder in general, you don't really want to give up a card on board for 2 counters. Like, that's just not going to be worth it. And when you're playing this as a 4-mana 3/3, that's not going to be worth it either. Sacrificing Earthbent lands also, by the way, not a bad thing to do because you do get the land back, even if you do lose a creature, in a sense. But this is another one of these signposts that does nicely overlap into like everything. It's good in the sacrifice deck, it's good in an earthbending deck, and it's good in a counter deck. So that's cool, but I don't love the card's fail case. I don't think you're going to have enough fodder to really consistently make sure you can cast this like when you need to. So I think this one just ends up being a C. Next, it's Hermetic Herbalist, which for a green and a blue is a 2/3 human druid ally at uncommon. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and you can tap it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, and spend this mana only to cast lesson spells. So this would be very good, even if it didn't help you cast lessons even more effectively than it does other spells, because it has sturdy stats for a 2-drop, and it's great at producing mana. Once you throw in the lesson upside, it gets to be quite good. I'm giving it a B. Next up, it's Iroh Grand Lotus, which for 3 generic, a green, a blue, and a red is a 5/5 legendary human noble ally at rare with firebending 2. During your turn, each non-lesson instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to that card's mana cost. During your turn, each lesson card in your graveyard has flashback for 1 generic. So a 6 mana 5/5, yeah, that's bad. But if you untap with him, you're likely to get absurd value out of your graveyard. Even if you don't have any lessons, flashing back some instant or sorcery is going to be really good. And if you do have lessons, which you're reasonably likely to have a couple of by this point in a deck in these colors, then you're going to cast like multiple cards in your turn, get a card of value or more out of all of them. And I think that's really great. Sometimes you'll even just be able to wait until you have 7 mana, cast him on 6, and then cast a lesson right away to make sure you get that 2-for-1 up front. Because the one problem he has is that you don't get value out of him right away most of the time. I mean, it's also a problem that he's not the most efficient creature ever, but it is a kind of card where if you're allowed to untap with him and play, you probably win, and sometimes you'll be able to go off a lot with him even on the turn you play him. But he is slow enough in enough situations that I think he's just an A- rather than a full-blown A. Next, it's Iroh Tea-Master, which for 1 generic, a red and a white, is a 2/2 legendary human citizen ally at rare. When it enters, you create a food token, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have target opponent gain control of target permanent you control. When you do, create a 1/1 white ally creature token, put a +1/+1 counter on that token for each permanent you own that your opponents control. A 3 mana 2/2 that makes a food isn't great, but the beginning of combat trigger here is interesting. I don't think giving the opponent a food to get a 2/2 token is incredible, but it's a deal worth making a decent chunk of the time. And if you have other good stuff to donate, like auras where it doesn't matter who controls them, or other tokens, or in the late game, random lands you wish you weren't drawing, the tokens you get become even more impressive. He's still not insane, but there are going to be some games that he legitimately takes over, and the baseline's acceptable. I'm giving him a C+. Next, it's Jet Freedom Fighter, which for 2 generic and 3 red-white hybrid mana is a 3/1 human rebel ally at uncommon. When he enters, he deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature an opponent controls. And when he dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So this looks really good. Red-white is a color pair that's about going wide, and so casting this is going to be really easy too, because it has red-white hybrid mana. It'll come down, kill something, and give you a body that can trade with like a 2 or 3 drop, and then put counters somewhere else. So it's going to feel kind of close to like a 3-for-1 when you do all of that stuff. He does take some setup, he does take some effort. He's also another one of these hybrid cards where they gave us 3 of these pips. So playing him in other decks, like your green-white ally deck, is going to be a lot harder than it is in red-white, so keep that in mind. But overall, this looks like it's just going to come down, kill something, give you a bunch of value. It's hard for me not to think that card's a B+, with the caveat that, yeah, if you're playing a green-white deck and this is in your deck, it probably dips all the way to a B-, just because it's significantly harder to cast. Next up, it's Katara the Fearless, which for a green, a white, and a blue is a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally at rare. If a triggered ability of an ally you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So there are lots of allies in this set, and some of them do have triggered abilities, but this is hard to cast, and it doesn't just care about allies. It only cares about the ones that have triggered abilities. And while those are around, successfully casting Katara, keeping her in play, then finally casting something that doubles a trigger is just going to be tough to do. I think she's just a D. Next up, it's Katara, Water Tribe's Hope, which for 2 generic, a white and 2 blue is a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally at rare. It's got Vigilance. When it enters, you make a 1/1 white ally creature token, and she has Waterbend X. Creatures you control have base power and toughness XX until end of turn. X can't be 0. Activate only during your turn. So 5 mana 3/3 with Vigilance, it makes a 1/1 isn't great, but that's the baseline. And the fact she helps you go wide goes great with her water bending ability, which can turn just about any board into something truly frightening. Now, you don't always have time to use that ability, and there are even times where it's not meaningful to, because you'd have to tap down creatures to make it super awesome, and that defeats the purpose somewhat. But you can still just pump regular mana into it and raise a bunch of creatures' base power and toughness, or depending on the board state, if you have a big trampler in play, raising its power and toughness is pretty great. So this has a good baseline, it gives you 2 bodies, and then it has an ability that your opponent does have to respect. I'm giving her a B. Next up, it's the Lion Turtle, which for 1 generic, a green and a blue is a 3/6 legendary Elder Cat Turtle at rare. It's got Vigilance and Reach. When it enters, you gain 3 life, but it can't attack or block unless there are 3 or more lessons in your graveyard, and you can tap it for 1 mana of any color. So this is kind of like a 3 mana rock that gains you 3 life, and that's not great, but it's not the worst baseline ever either. 3 lessons is asking a lot though. The cards that say like if you have 1 lesson, something good happens, I'm in on those. That's going to be easy to do. Obviously 3 is a lot more than 1. It's just a tall order. So I think this just ends up being a 3 mana rock a little too often to be anything more than a C, but maybe by the late game, it starts to have a more relevant body, and that's certainly good upside to have on your mana rock. Next up, it's Long Fang, Grand Secretariat, which for 1 generic and 2 black-green hybrid mana is a 2/3 legendary human advisor at uncommon. Whenever another creature you control or a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So this is a pretty good trigger for stuff dying, and it gets particularly good with sacrifice stuff, especially with Earthbent lands again, because those come back and then you get a counter as well. But a 3 mana 2/3 isn't good, and we've seen these triggers a lot over the years, and they are surprisingly difficult to consistently trigger when you want them to, so I think he's just a C+. Next, it's Messenger Hawk, which for 2 generic and a blue-black hybrid mana is a 1/2 Bird Scout at common with flying. When it enters, you create a clue, and it gets +2/+0 as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. 3 mana for a 1/2 flyer that gives you a clue is kind of passable. You're definitely overpaying, but not by an insane amount, and this will be a 3/2 sometimes. Still, it does feel inefficient overall. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Ozai, the Phoenix King, which for 2 generic and 2 black and 2 red is a 7/7 legendary human noble at Mythic Rare, has Trample, Firebending 4, and Haste. If you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes red instead, and Ozai has Flying and Indestructible as long as you have 6 or more unspent mana. So it's a little color intensive to cast it, but it will virtually always smash in for 7 right away, while also giving you a bunch of mana that you never lose. And sometimes I turn my nose up at that kind of effect in Limited. I mean, once you've spent 6 on this, it doesn't really matter that you have all this mana building up, especially because he helps you build it up with his Firebending. But because Ozai has a payoff for not spending that mana, it's pretty amazing. I mean, by the second time Ozai attacks, he's going to gain Flying and Indestructible in almost every scenario. And of course, the format just has more places to spend mana because they made sure of that for Firebending. So yeah, I think he's a bomb. You know, he does have a turn where he's a little vulnerable, but he'll usually have smashed in for 7. He's also a little mana intensive. Those things hold him back from being completely insane, but I think he's an A-. Next up, it's Platypus Bear, which for 1 generic and a blue-green hybrid mana is a 2/3 Platypus Bear. At common, it's got Defender. When it enters, you mill 2 cards. And as long as there's a lesson card in your graveyard, this creature can attack as though it didn't have Defender. It's not very often that the 2-drop with Defender that loses Defender when X happens is all that good. I mean, if it were just a 2 mana 2/3 all the time, it wouldn't be that good. I mean, obviously it'd be pretty good because it does have the graveyard enters trigger, but that's not an insane card by any stretch. It's not a card you're like super eager to play. And this is a lot worse than that because it just won't be able to attack a decent chunk of the time, giving it a D+. Next up, it's Pretending Poxbearers, which for 1 generic and a white-black hybrid mana is a 2/1 human citizen ally at common, and when it dies, you make a 1/1 white ally creature token. This is just a really good rate. 2 mana for a 2/1 that dies into a 1/1 is where you want to be in like a lot of Limited decks. And it has good synergy in the format. You know, it's good in the green-white ally deck. It's good in the black-white sacrifice deck. So it ends up working quite nicely in the format, giving it a C+. Next, it's Professor Zai, Anthropologist, which for 2 blue-red hybrid mana is a 0/3 legendary human advisor ally at uncommon. You can tap it and discard a card to draw a card, and you can pay 1 generic, tap and sacrifice Professor Zai, and return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Activate only during your turn. Rummaging isn't quite as good as looting, but it's still a powerful effect to have easy manaless access to, and while getting back a spell isn't a huge deal, after all you're giving up a card to get it back, and that kind of card selection is useful sometimes, but it's not like insane or anything. And Professor's Eye doesn't contribute a whole lot when it comes to combat, but overall it's a pretty good card. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Sandbender Scavengers, which for a white and a black is a 1/1 human rogue at rare. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. When this creature dies, you may exile it. When you do, return target creature with mana value less than or equal to this creature's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this gets better the more sacrifice stuff you have and the more cheap creatures you have, because this will feel at its best when it can even get a creature back even when it doesn't gain a single +1/+1 counter. This format is set up pretty well to grow it too, and the more it grows, the better things it can get back, in addition to being a threat in its own right. But it does have a pretty bad baseline, and sometimes you just don't have the time to get something like this going. It's not particularly good if you draw it after you've done sacrifice stuff earlier in the game, for example. So I think it's just a C+. Next up, it's Sokka, Bold Boomeranger, which for a blue and a red is a 1/1 legendary human warrior ally at rare. When it enters, you discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. Whenever you cast an artifact or lesson spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Sokka. I'm already in on a 2-mana 1/1 that lets me discard 2 and draw 2. Like, that's a pretty good card. It gives you graveyard synergy, digs you deeper in your deck, smooths out your draws. Like, if you keep a 2-land hand and you really need to hit a 3rd land drop, it can do that for you. That's just a good card. It is a little challenging to cast, and that would make it a little worse than if it was like 1 generic and a blue. But that's the baseline here, and he has the capacity to grow. I will say there aren't like a ton of artifacts in this set. This isn't an artifact set. There probably are more lessons in the set than artifacts, but he does have the potential to grow, and he has a good baseline. So there's a lot to like here. I think this is a B. Next up, it's Sokka Lateral Strategist, which for 1 generic and 2 blue-white hybrid mana is a 2/4 legendary human warrior ally at uncommon. It's got vigilance, and when it attacks with at least 1 other creature, you draw a card. So 3 mana 2/4 vigilance, not a terrible starting point, and this can draw you cards as long as it attacks with a friend. The bad news is attacking with this on turn 4 usually means your opponent can block and kill it, but if you can draw a card and at least force a trade with it, that's fine. It's also another one of these hybrids that's well designed because it's good in the Flyers deck, which is the blue-white thing, because it's usually easier to have another attacker if your attacker has flying. It's an ally, so it works in green-white, and it likes it when you go wide, so it's good in red-white. And that kind of thing does elevate how good a card is when it just slots into all those different decks. It's not 3 pips, but obviously it is better in a blue-white deck because it's easier to cast. But I think it's a C+ overall. There are going to be situations where Sokka can't really attack effectively, and that matters. Next, it's Sokka Tenacious Tactician, which for 1 generic, a blue, a red, and a white is a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally at rare with menace and prowess. Other allies you control have menace and prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white ally creature token. This is an insane value engine that's likely to make several creatures better the second it comes down, and things can easily snowball from there. Even casting 1 non-creature spell with this around will feel incredible, and if you do more than that, there's a good chance your opponent just loses. Now, one downside here is that green-white is where allies are the most concentrated. There are plenty in these other colors too, but green-white is the ally deck, and you're not going to have access to green allies, which I do think matters because it makes it less likely it comes down and augments your board right away. It feels more likely that you cast spells to make allies that then have menace and prowess than it does that you play this and give a bunch of your board menace and prowess, though that will happen sometimes. But that does hold it back a little. It's another card where like it has a medium baseline because it's a 4 mana 3/3, and you do kind of have to untap and have the right kind of card to go off. And I think that's doable enough for this to be great, but it's just an A- instead of, a full-blown insane bomb. Next up, it's Suki Kyoshi Warrior, which for 2 generic and 2 green-white hybrid mana is a legendary star 4 human warrior ally at uncommon. Its power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and when Suki attacks, you create a 1/1 white ally creature token that's tapped and attacking. So she's not really very good on her own, but she won't be alone that often, and she can make sure she's not alone with her own ability, although Being a 4-mana 2/4 that makes a 1/1 when it attacks isn't exactly going to move the needle if that's all you've got going on, but this will be a big formidable attacker often enough that I think it's a C+. Again, it's another hybrid card that fits in lots of places, whether it's red, white, go wide, or green, white allies. Next, it's Sun Warriors, which for 2 generic, a red and a white, is a 3/5 human warrior ally at uncommon. It has Firebending X, where X is a number of creatures you control, and you can pay 5 generic to make a 1/1 white ally creature token. So this does count itself, so it's at least got Firebending 1, and its ability is a great place to spend Firebending mana, which will continue to grow because of its ability. Those two things feed off of each other, and a 4-mana 3/5 isn't the worst baseline either. Like, I'd play this card even if it didn't have Firebending. 4-mana 3/5 with this ability, like, that's just a good late-game mana sink to have access to, but it gets way better when you've got Firebending throughout the set and on this card itself, so I think it's a B-. Next up, it's Tolls of War, which for a black and a white is an uncommon enchantment. When it enters, you get a clue, and when you sacrifice a permanent during your turn, you create a 1/1 white ally creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. It is kind of a bummer this only works on your turn, but getting a 1/1 when you sack a clue is quite good, and you're going to have other clues in black-white too, not to mention other ways to sacrifice things that aren't clues, so this is going to spit out 1/1 tokens reasonably well. It is going to feel kind of mediocre on turn 2 a lot of the time when you aren't able to immediately get value out of it. But it feels like a legit value engine to me, even if it is a little restricted. I'm giving it a C+. Next, it's Toph, Hard-Headed Teacher, which for 2 generic, a red and a green, is a 3/4 legendary human warrior ally at rare. When it enters, you can discard a card, and if you do, you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Whenever you cast a spell, Earthbend 1, if that spell is a lesson, put an additional +1/+1 counter on that land. Giving up a card in hand to get a spell back is solid, especially when that spell is going to generate additional value in the form of Earthbending. A 4-mana 3/4 isn't a great stat line, but there are worse baselines on a card that has 2 useful abilities. I think this is a B. Next, it's Toph, the first Metal Bender, which for 1 generic, a red, a green, and a white, is a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally at rare. Non-token artifacts you control are lands in addition to their other types, and at the beginning of your end step, you Earthbend 2. She's tough to cast and limited, but being able to animate a land every turn, or even an artifact that is also a land, can be pretty sweet. And because it's an end step trigger, you can get that value right away. It can be particularly nice to Earthbend an artifact with a good enters or death trigger, since you'll get it back when it dies. Still, it takes some serious work, both in your mana base and deck contents that you don't always have control over, so I think she's a C+. Next up, it's Uncle Ero, which for 1 generic and 2 red-green hybrid mana is a 4/2 legendary human noble ally at uncommon, Firebending 1, and he makes lesson spells you cast, cost 1 less to cast. A 3-mana 4/2 with Firebending 1, not something I'm super pumped about, and while lessons are around in the format, there aren't so many that this cost reduction effect is insane on a card that's generally underwhelming, but he does do enough, and he also has 4 power, which the red-green deck cares about, that I think he's a C. Next up, it's Vindictive Warden, which for 2 generic and a black-red hybrid mana is a 2/3 human soldier at common. It's got Menace and Firebending 1, and he can pay 3 generic, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. 3-mana 2/3 Menace, if that was it here, not a great card. I mean, there are worse baselines, but it's not great. But this can generate mana thanks to Firebending, and it has one of these mana sinks that goes well with Firebending, so I think he's a C. Next up, it's Wandering Musicians, which for 3 generic and a red-white hybrid mana is a 2/5 human bard ally at common. When it attacks, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. This doesn't seem great. It does buff itself, so it attacks as a 3/5, but it isn't such a huge buff that it drastically improves your board state. And if you haven't managed to go wide at all, it's actively underwhelming. I think it's just a C-. Next up, it's White Lotus Reinforcements, which for 1 generic, a green and a white, is a 2/3 human soldier ally at uncommon. It's got Vigilance. Other allies you control get +1/+1. I really wish they'd made this a 3/3, although the fact that they didn't might mean that this card was too good when it was one. And yeah, that could definitely be the case. There are allies everywhere in the set, and green-white is where they're really concentrated. And this is likely to buff like 10 plus of your creatures, and maybe more when considering tokens. So the stat line's a little underwhelming, but this will do serious work in every green-white deck. I'm giving it a B-. Next, there's Zhao, Ruthless Admiral, who for 2 generic and 2 black-red hybrid mana is a 3/4 legendary human soldier at uncommon. It's got Firebending 2, and whenever you sacrifice another permanent, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. It is sad he doesn't come with a built-in sacrifice ability, even if he had one that costs like 6 or something. because he does need a little bit of help to get going. It's doable to be sure, but not remotely automatic, and the baseline without the mass buff isn't anything special. You know, the idea here is that it works nicely in the sacrifice deck, which is generally black-white, works nice in the go wide deck, which is red-white, works well in firebending decks, but it doesn't seem like it's that good in any of them. To me, it's probably at its best in a sacrifice deck because that's where most of this card's value is. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Zuko Conflicted, which for a black and a red is a 2/3 legendary human rogue at rare. At the beginning of your first main phase, choose one that hasn't been chosen, and you lose 2 life. Draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Zuko, add red mana, or exile Zuko, then return him to the battlefield under an opponent's control. This is a really cool design, but I don't think it's an amazing card in Limited. I do like that when you play him, you're going to get those first 3 value triggers, whether it's the mana, counter, draw a card. You're going to get those in some order before your opponent ever gets access to them. But that also means you're going to lose 6 life. So that matters. Also, it does mean that Zuko is likely to help you pressure your opponent enough that when they do gain control of him, losing life might be worse for them. But it does seem like there are lots of scenarios where you play this and you just can't really get enough value out of it to justify the significant life loss and the fact that your opponent eventually gains control of it. So I think he's fine, but he's not great. I'm giving him a C. Now we're moving to the colorless artifacts, starting with Barrels of Blasting Jelly, which for 1 generic is a common artifact. You can pay 1 generic to add 1 mana of any color, activate only once each turn, and you can pay 5, tap it, and sacrifice it to deal 5 damage to target creature. This looks pretty solid to me. Mana filtering for 1 tends to play pretty well, especially when you don't have to tap a second land to do it. Like, if you're using a filter land, it can be a little bit worse because it's like you're tapping 2 lands. Here, it really is just filtering. You tap 1 land and get the color you want. So that's a good way to fix your mana. And it turns into bad removal once you don't really need that, which is okay to have. But I think what probably helps support this card even more is that there's enough stuff going on in the format that lets you cash it in for other purposes. You can sacrifice it in the black-white deck for value, and you can tap it for waterbending. So I think those things, combined with it being an okay card to begin with, make it a solid playable. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Bender's Water Skin, which for 3 generic is a common artifact that untaps during each other player's untap step, and it can tap for 1 mana of any color. So this is mostly just Manalith, and that's not usually a very good card in Limited. We did see a recent exception to that, but Tarkir Dragonstorm was a very unique format, and I don't see this being one where you want to play a 3 mana card that doesn't add to the board and only has a small effect. The untap thing is especially irrelevant in most Limited games, even with waterbending and stuff like that, so I think it's just a D. Next up, it's Fire Nation Worship, which for 3 generic is a 4/4 artifact vehicle at uncommon. It's got reach. When it dies, you make a clue token, and it has crew 2. So this can give you a 2-for-1, and that makes it pretty good sacrifice fodder. But I don't love the idea of like a 3 mana 4/4 vehicle with reach and crew 2. I also wish you got the clue up front. That would be way better. Random vehicles are a little better in a format with waterbending and also in a format where you can sack artifacts for value. And if you can trade this off and get a clue, even if you do have to crew it, that seems fine. But I still don't love that it's as conditional of a creature as it is, and that you don't get the clue until after it dies, so I think it's a C-. Next, it's Kyoshi Battle Fan, which for 2 generic is a common artifact equipment. When it enters, you make a 1/1 white ally creature token, then attach this equipment to it. The equipped creature gets +1/+0, and you can equip it for 2 generic. We saw this card more or less in Final Fantasy, and it was pretty adequate. That said, had more of an artifact and equipment sub-theme than this one does, but the ally typing is nice, as is the fact that this gives you 2 things to sacrifice in like black-white. Kind of works nicely with airbending too. It's definitely not a premium 2-drop or even close to it, but it adds to the board and does just enough to make the cut reasonably often. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Meteor Sword, which for 7 generic mana is an uncommon artifact equipment. When it enters, you destroy target permanent. The equipped creature gets +3/+3, and you can equip it for 3 generic. This is going to be solid. That's not something I say very often about 7 mana equipment, but this can hit any permanent, and while the equipment itself isn't worth a whole card in most cases, that part of the card certainly is, and this can grant a pretty big buff in the late game, you know, when it comes down, and that can make most things into a threat. It's also pretty sweet with airbending, like it's a good thing to exile and recast for only 2 mana. It's still not insane, it's 7 mana after all and doesn't break the game wide open or anything, and there aren't that many decks that are in the market for a 7-drop, but if you are on one of those, it's fine. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Planetarium of Wan Shi Tong, which for 6 generic is a mythic rare legendary artifact. You can pay 1 generic and tap it to scry 2. Whenever you scry or surveil, look at the top card of your library. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Do this only once each turn. And you look at the card after you scry or surveil. So I don't love that this doesn't add to the board right away, at least not if you play it when you have 6 mana. But if you have the time, waiting to play it and use the scry ability in the same turn does mean that you've got a great chance at impacting the board. And after that, you end up getting a free spell every turn, or an almost free spell. You have to pay 1 mana, assuming you don't have other scry or surveil things around. But that does basically mean you draw a card and get a huge discount every time you use the ability, and that's a value engine that can really win you a game. You do have to ding a card for not adding to the board unless the situation is just right, like you have a 7th mana, because that can be very scary in most limited formats. Like if your opponent has just curved out and this is your turn 6, there's a good chance you die before anything ever happens. So you have to keep that in mind, but I think it's a B. I hope it's a format where it ends up being a straight up bomb though. Next up, it's Trusty Boomerang, which for 1 generic mana is an uncommon artifact equipment. The equipped creature has 1 generic, tap target creature, return Trusty Boomerang to its owner's hand, and this can equip for 1 generic. So at least it's better than Razor Boomerang, but I still don't think this is all that good. Spending 2 mana and having to tap a creature every time you want to tap something isn't exactly ideal. Equipment are a little interesting in this set because of water bending, but this one isn't staying on the board and requires you to tap a creature to use the ability, so it kind of doesn't do anything special with water bending when you think about it. It gets a little interesting if you have triggers for casting non-creature spells. Those are around, but I think it's so like all in on having the exact right synergy, and it has such a bad baseline that it's just a D. Next up, it's the Walls of Ba Sing Se, which for 8 generic is a 0/30 legendary artifact creature wall at Mythic Rare. It's got Defender. Other permanents you control have Indestructible. An 8 mana card needs to win you the game pretty convincingly, and this doesn't really do it. Sure, all that indestructibility can allow you to find an advantage, but if you're behind on board when you play this, you're probably still behind, and if your creatures are too small to attack effectively, well, they still are. It is better on defense, of course, like when you have a board of indestructible creatures. As long as you can block your opponent's stuff, it's going to be tough for them to attack. And obviously you have a 0/30 in play that's pretty good at blocking, but it isn't indestructible itself either, so that is a problem. It still wouldn't be that good, honestly, even if it was, but without indestructibility on the Walls of Ba Sing Se itself, it's really not very good. It's easily killable by a lot of cards in the format at 8 mana. That's a big problem, especially because it doesn't generate an immediate advantage unless you kind of already were ahead and have better creatures than your opponent does. So I think this is just an F. Next, there's White Lotus Tile, which for 4 generic is a mythic rare artifact that enters tapped, and you can tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a creature type in common. So this is a mana rock with Lotus in the name, I guess, but this one's not very good in limited. Sure, you can have lots of allies in this set and it can tap for lots of mana, but only in the right situation and only after spending 4 on something that doesn't add to the board. And even in this format, you're not always going to have enough allies and enough cards to, or abilities to spend the mana on for it to be worth it. So I think it's just an F. Now we're moving to lands. Our first land is Abandoned Air Temple. It enters tapped unless you control a basic land, can tap for white, and you can pay 3 generic and a white to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. There's a whole cycle of these and they're pretty nice. As in limited, they mostly feel like basics with upside because most limited decks are loaded up with basic lands. They will enter untapped in the vast majority of situations, and they all come with nice utility. And I think this one might be the best of the bunch because its activated ability can add to the board in a massive way. It's a little expensive, sure, but it's a repeatable mass buff effect, and if you're flooding out, you're going to be happy to have this land around, and the cost of running it is incredibly low. It'll function just like a Plains when you need it to, and then turn into a value engine of sorts in the late game. I think it's a B-. Utility lands that can actually add to the board are very nice. Next up, it's Agna Kella. It's a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land, and you can tap it for blue, and you can pay 2 generic and a blue and tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. So again, this is an island with really awesome upside, as looting is great in the late game and can guarantee you keep drawing gas. This is a nice utility land, and the cost of running it, like all of these in this cycle, is pretty much non-existent. It's basically just an island with upside. I'm giving it a C+. Next, let's look at the cycle of dual lands in the set. They're all common. They all enter tapped. They can tap for 2 different colors of mana, and you can pay 4 generic, tap them, and sacrifice them to draw a card. Duels always give nice fixing, even when they enter tapped, and the fact that these can give themselves up when you're flooding out is great. One thing that is likely to come up, if you earthbend one of these, sacrificing it to draw can be kind of sweet. But yeah, the good fixing here and value beyond that makes me think it's a C+. Next up, it's Ba Sing Se, which is a rare land. It enters tapped unless you control a basic land. You can tap it for a green, and you can pay 2 generic and a green and tap it and earthbend 2, but activate it only as a sorcery. Earthbending with your extra mana is sweet, and there's almost no downside, once again, to running this land. And it's a land that can actually add to the board, so I think this one's a B-. Next up, it's Fire Nation Palace, a rare land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land. It can tap for red. You can pay 1 generic and a red and tap it, and target creature you control gains Firebending 4 until end of turn. This one is more underwhelming than the others because the upside here is pretty medium. I mean, it's still basically a mountain with upside, but the upside is pretty narrow. It kind of just has you pay 2 mana to get 2 more mana, but super restricted on that 2 other mana, and you have to tap 3 total lands to do it, so it's even less impressive. Sure, sometimes you're going to have the upside of getting that 1 extra land, helps you use an activated ability, or can't cast an instant, or whatever, but it's a super situational effect that isn't useful in most situations, whereas like Earthbending or putting counters on your things or looting is. Firebending just isn't always that useful. So I think it's probably just a C. Next up, it's Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop, a rare land that can tap for colorless. It can tap for 1 mana of any color too, but you can spend that mana only to cast an ally spell or activate an ability of an ally source. And you can pay 5 generic and tap it to make a 1/1 white allied creature token. Most of the time, lands that only make mana of any color for 1 creature type aren't great in limited when they otherwise produce colorless. There are just so many cards in your deck that this kind of land is bad for. And not just the creatures without the specified types, but all your other cards too that aren't creatures at all. But between the preponderance of allies in this set and a solid late game activated ability, this isn't going to be as bad as most of those other cards have been. It's still not going to be great for your mana all the time, but it will be better than similar cards and has additional utility. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Realm of Ko. It enters tapped unless you control a basic land. It can tap for black mana, and you can pay 3 generic and a black to make a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token that can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. These tokens aren't so good if you're behind. They kind of won't feel like they're adding to the board at all when you are. But if you're ahead, they can turn into a very real win condition, and it's hard to be upset about that when it's extra value offered to you by a land. I'm giving it a B-. Next up, it's Rumble Arena, a common land with Vigilance. When it enters, you scry 1, you can tap it for colorless, and you can pay 1 generic and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. A land that scries and filters tends to be pretty useful in most formats, and this even comes with the upside of having Vigilance when you animate it with Earthbend, giving it a C. Next, there's Secret Tunnel, which is a rare land cave that can't be blocked. You can tap it for colorless, and you can pay 4 generic and tap it, and 2 target creatures you control that share a creature type can't be blocked this turn. This is a kind of wacky card, but I think this format actually supports it. If you ever animate it with Earthbending, it's unblockable. That's cool. And if you're in one of the ally-heavy color pairs, especially green-white, it's likely to be able to give those things unblockability when you have the mana and nothing else to spend it on. Now, you do still have to weigh the cost of running a land that produces colorless only, because that does undoubtedly do damage to your mana base, and that does temper my expectations some, so I think it's probably a C. Next, there's White Lotus Hideout, which is an uncommon land that can tap for colorless. You can also tap it for 1 mana of any color, but only to be spent on a lesson or shrine. And you can pay 1 generic and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So this is a filter land. Those are always okay ways to fix your mana, and sometimes this will help you play a lesson or a shrine. I think it's a C. So those are all the multicolored and colorless cards in Avatar: The Last Airbender. In the next video, we'll look at all the white cards. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching this video when more of the set review is out, you should see the playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.